Hello viewers, and welcome back to my video blog. This is video 2 of a 3-part video on the book Nightmares and Dreamscapes by Stephen King. Again, on this video I have chosen to do it mostly based on an audiobook that I read and also heard, and also from the book that I've read as well. So let's get started. The first book that I read at this first part was called Chattery Teeth. It was read by Kathy Bates, and it was about a guy named Bill Hogan who is going just down the road, and he stops at kind of a souvenir shop, and these bunch of chattery teeth just kind of tweak his eye a bit. They're, if you're aware of the chattery teeth that have a wind and little walking things. And so he buys them. It's kind of an impulse thing. And going outside, he notices a hitchhiker who's kind of, as he sees, kind of like a hippie dude, like, hey man, what's going on? Can you give me a ride? Do you dig? That type of thing. So he ends up picking him up and taking him on his ride. And through this kind of hippie dude Bill thinks he's kind of weird and weirder as he goes on. And as it turns out, this hippie guy is kind of a robber, and he does stick a knife in him. And then Bill has the bag that contains the chattery teeth in it between him and the hippie guy. And in Bill's own amazing eyes, the chattery teeth start to walk and kind of make the chattery sound as you imagine with chattery teeth. And both Bill and the hippie are amazed by this, and the hippie guy's like, WTF, what's going on? And Bill sees with amazement that these chattery teeth start to eat the hippie and start to actually kill him. And Bill blanks out a couple of times, and when he comes to, both the hippie is gone, and the chattery teeth are still there. So now he's like, I gotta get the heck out of here. And that's how that story ends. I thought it was interesting. Never thought of chattery teeth coming to life. But this is Stephen King we're talking about. So, the next story is called My Pretty Pony. It was read by Jerry Garcia. And this is a good example of not all that Stephen King writes is horror. It's not all scary. My Pretty Pony is actually kind of a sad story. It's about a grandfather talking to his grandson on his grandfather's deathbed, and he talks about how his grandson should not waste time, or should not waste his life. My Pretty Pony is supposed to resemble time, and his grandfather keeps talking about, or tells him stories about his childhood, and how he kind of wasted time in his youth and doesn't want his grandson to waste time in his youth. So it's a kind of sad story. I didn't understand it, I actually had to look up what it meant, because unfortunately sometimes I'm not really good with this means something completely different. So but I enjoyed it. So alright, moving on. We have Sneakers. That's the story, and it is read by Dave Cronenberg, and it's about, let's see, my little notes here. It's about a man named John Tell, and he's a record producer, or he works in kind of a record producing company, and he is in the third floor men's stall, and he notices a pair of sneakers in an empty stall, and the door's closed. So he doesn't know if there's a guy sitting there or what, but he just thinks it's odd, and he goes about his business, and days go by where he keeps noticing these sneakers, and each time he notices them, they're getting more dirty and more decomposed, and there's flies starting to get all around them, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And where he's dealing with people in his workplace that he doesn't like, and he's hearing kind of weird stories about his workplace because he's kind of new there. and he hears from a janitor. He hears from a janitor about a drug dealer who was delivering his goods to the workplace, and needed the drug dealer needed to use the bathroom, and as he was getting ready to do that, a disgruntled employee, I guess, burst in and stabbed him, and that's where he learned that these sneakers that he found actually belonged to the drug dealer, and he this John Tell finally gets the courage to open the door to this bathroom stall, and the drug dealer is still standing there. It's his ghost, actually, and he starts talking to him. And so I thought it was kind of scary, but I thought it was good. So next is Dedication. This was read by Lindsay Krause. This was kind of another one that I didn't really understand while listening to it. And unfortunately, I might not do very well with this one. It's about a woman who's a maid at a New York hotel, and she has a son who is a published author, and this son has his first book. He's dedicated his book to his mother, and this mother says and tells her friend of why this dedication is important, and talks about how even though his father is his biological father, he is not his real father, or his real father. Like I said, it has to do with black magic, and because while she's pregnant, she goes to this palm reader or psychic, and she says, "Oh, your son is great. He's going to live fulfilledly, and he will know his real father." And it turns out this woman is black, and she tracks down this father, and this father ends up being white, even though the son is born looking completely like her husband. Again, it's kind of odd. I didn't really care for it because I didn't understand it, but if you're into like kind of that black magic-y thing, you might like it. So, the next story is called The Doctor's Case. It was read by Tim Curry. It is a Sherlock Holmes Watson story. And it has kind of a fun little twist, because even though I have not really read anything by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle about Sherlock Holmes, I do know that he is usually the brains of the operation, and he's the one that figures out all the cases. However, this one is different. Watson is the one that figures this out. It's just a murder of a family, or of a man, and who's got kind of a young wife and his children, and they're wondering who killed him, and Watson discovers that one of his sons did kill him through shadows and things like that. I thought it was kind of cute, and I liked Tim Curry, so yay. The next story is called The Moving Finger, and when I wanted to read this book, this was the story that I dreaded reading, because I kind of knew what it was about before, and even the title scares me. It was read by Eve Blagarian. I'm not sure who that is. It was about a guy who lives in Queens, and he discovers a finger in his bathroom drain. And if that's not scary enough, this finger starts to kind of move around, and it's kind of what I imagined was kind of a telescope, or kind of a thing, or maybe that's what the guy describes it as. And this guy he's the only one that sees it. He has his wife, and it's said in the story that she goes and uses the bathroom many times, and she doesn't see this thing. So it's really in his mind that he sees it. And so finally he has to take matters in his own hands, because if he doesn't do something about this, it's gonna it's going to drive him insane. And so he decides to use a pair of electric hedge clippers and and drain cleaner to get rid of this thing, and it's a whole big mess. Yes, I thought it was scary, but it's not like Psycho. I used my bathroom. I wasn't afraid that there was going to be a finger in my sink drain, but again, I thought it was scary, and at least the scariest story that I've read so far in this series. So there you go. The next story is called The End of the Whole Mess. It was read by Matthew Broderick. It is about two brothers. It's actually told by the older brother, and the brothers are Howard and Bobby Furlow, and they grow up very privileged, and they're very smart. One of them is Bobby is the one that is way smarter than Howard. And as adults, Bobby has said that he has found a way to cure everything, to cure diseases and all of the violence in the world, that he can cure it. And he finds out that it's in the water system in La Plata. And he and Howard they find a way to contain this water, but they realize that this water, although it cures a lot of violence and a lot of diseases, it also leads to early Alzheimer's. So there's, it's kind of like the yin and yang thing. This, of course, the things that these things come with prices. There's a lot of good with curing diseases and stopping violence, but early autism or early Alzheimer's, there's a problem there. So I thought it was good. That's another one that, like I said, was in the Nightmares and Dreamscapes story or movie version on TNT a couple of years ago. As with... Oh, that's the only one in this one. So, the last story is called Home Delivery. It was read by Stephen King. It's his version of a zombie story. It deals with a woman who lives on an island in Maine, so they're, of course, detached from the mainland, and she's pregnant, and she realizes that a lot of her neighbors and her fellow townsmen are becoming zombies. And she thinks to herself, okay, my baby is going to be born in a home delivery. That's why, hence the title. And she loses her husband after she becomes pregnant, and she realizes there's kind of a fun climactic scene in it where her husband does come back to her as a zombie, and unfortunately she has to kill him. I won't tell you how, but it was kind of cute. And and then she ends up with saying, okay, this is going to be a home delivery, which means she has to deliver her baby herself. So, and that's where the story ends. You don't know if the baby was born or not, or what it was or what. So, anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this volume, and hopefully the third volume will be to come. And I bid you all a pleasant day.